This is our last section for the day, and so I wanted to start it fairly much on time so that we get away and we can go for our dinners a little later on. If you didn't get to find out where your dinner was, you didn't see an email from Stephanie, then you can still do that afterwards. So for our last session today, it feels like the right session to end our day as well, because aren't we all amazing? I think, although that last couple of topics that we heard was a little bit, I wondered why he called his business Scream. Where is he? But people, this is advancement, this is progress, but what we're doing is the creativity piece, so I think that's really important. And this afternoon's final sessions are going to just explore that again, bringing it back down a little bit to reality. So we're going to kick off with our first session, and that's with Nick Tomlinson from Paprika Systems, created for creative agencies. Now, I'm actually going to be with Nick on stage, so I get to be up here a little longer. Thank you, Nick. Yep. Nick and I actually just went to Australia last month. Well, it was last month. What time zone am I in? We met last year at the Indie Summit in Singapore. We just stuck up a conversation really about Paprika, the product, and I felt very much, as I have meeting some of you today, that Australia needs to know. We are a long way away, but we have a big marketplace. So, long story short, I invited Nick to join me on a three cities in 3 days roadshow. We had 7 in our entourage, and we presented at the Sydney Opera House, then up to Brisbane and then Melbourne to over 100 agencies. I was very excited to introduce Nick and his product, and the reception has been great. So being here today on stage with Nick, I just really want you to share what you know, not about the product necessarily, it's what it does for your agency. That's the most important thing from my perspective. So welcome, Nick, thank you. Let's hear a little bit about it. We've only got a short amount of time. Yes, you've got your clicker.
Okay, so I want to talk about profit. Now, it was billed as project management for profit, but I think the whole topic of profit needs a bit of a build-up because it's been taking a bit of a hammering. And these just are a few press cuttings that I took randomly of people are saying making too much profit. Your clients, it's okay to make a bit of profit, but not too much. Your employees, it's good for work for a profitable company, but not too profitable. Your suppliers want you to be profitable, but not too profitable. So, yeah, you can be profitable, but be careful. You don't want to be too profitable. So basically today is all about in praise of profit and all that means. So profit is a good thing because it provides a number of opportunities. It provides reward and affirmation. It provides investment. No one's going to invest in your business unless it's a profitable business and they're going to make a return. Equally, if you don't make profits, you can't invest yourself. You can't plow those profits into the business. And you need profit to generate resilience. And I mean, I was brought up in the Kent countryside down in southeast England. And, you know, I used to spend my summer vacations helping on a farm, and I know a lot of farmers. And I've never come across a farmer who said, I make too much profit. They're quite canny people. But, you know, when they have a good year, they have a good harvest, they make a good return, they're very pleased with that, and they think, well, that's partly because I've planted the right crops at the right time. But they also know that they live by the weather, and it's good luck. And if they've had a good year, it's because they've been lucky with the weather. And so they will take some of that out as a profit, but they will also invest for the future. They'll buy that combine harvester, which means they can get the harvest in 2 weeks quicker next year so that they're not dependent on the weather. They will put a bit of money in the bank just in case it rains all year. And so there's an element of the right amount of profit that they need to make. And I mean, what's the right amount of profit? Do you think you're making the right amount of profit?
Well, Morkinson Smith said this morning it could be like 6% or it should be 20%. So the right amount of profit is different every year, and depending on the weather or the environment we're in, it could be different. But all of those 3 points are very relevant for everything we've learnt today, because without profit, you can't do the investment yourself and you won't have enough for a rainy day.
Well, who here thinks you're making too much profit?
They they've left the room. They're in first class,
Kind of
travelling
what I
back to.
expected. Who thinks that they're making the right level of profit? So, yeah, there are other things other than chasing the money. Who feels they're making the right? I thought I might get one. 2. Who would like to make more profit?
Of course.
It's kind of what we thought would be. So the good news is I'm going to show you 2 ways, the only 2 ways that you can grow your profit. And I'm going to show you an easy way of growing your profit by 20%. The first way is increase your revenue. I mean, this isn't going to be a surprise. So I'm stating the obvious. But when I'm stating the obvious, I'm never wrong, so that's good. So the 2 ways are, the first one, increase your revenue. And the second one, you may have already guessed, is decrease your expenditure.
Ta-da! That's it. Shake it out.
So it took me a while to work that out. So if we look at our little revenue and expenditure graph, now the numbers are fairly simple, so I can do the maths in my head in front of an audience. But, you know, let's say you have $10 million in revenue and your expenditure is $9 million and you're very conveniently making $1 million of profit. And I mean, when we were talking about Kingston, what was the average? Was 13%? So
Over the time, yes.
yeah, so that's about right. That's kind of your typical agency.
I might just interrupt here. The simplicity is on purpose. You can lay your own agency figures here and see what it actually is. Keep going.
Talking about the professional design
Oh
side.
yeah, there's really artistic design. But any business could do this and make it really simple. Visuals are my favourite thing. Go ahead.
Now the thing about the profit is there is no profit pump. I'm not this way of increasing your profitability by 20%. There isn't a magic formula that you can apply to the profit. You can only increase that profit because it is a small number, which is the difference between the 2 big numbers, and you basically have you've got to manipulate the big numbers so that you can make a change in the small number.
So this is a great visual that Nick came up with. And you can imagine yourself trying to, with the revenue, run up those escalators, but unfortunately you're losing along the way, potentially if clients are not paying you the right amount. Expenditure, you want to go the other way, but it's always going up. So the 2 of them are opposing each other, and if you stand still, you'll just go sliding backwards. So it was a great example of that simplicity again, of just being able to explain how you need to factor in and focus on those 2 elements.
Yeah, so you're trying to go up the down escalator and down the up escalator. And what happens when you have inflation? We've just been up to 10%, we're down to 4%, and it may go up or down. What happens when you have inflation? The escalators start moving faster. So you trip or you stop to tie your shoelace and you're way past, your profit's all gone. So it's a tough world. So back looking at our 2 big numbers, and if we look first off at expenditure, so we have 9 million of expenditure, and we can drill a little bit into that to see how that's made up.
This is really great as well. I know that within your P&Ls you've probably got little divisions, or it's just one big OPEX, operating expenditure, depends on your business. I think we heard this morning, around 60%, 55 to 60% for permanent staff. The freelance one was the moving one. I think having categorised some of your expenditure into elective costs and absorbed direct costs would be key here to managing your expenses. Because the elective ones, you know what they are at the beginning of the year. If we make our profit figure, we could do this. But if you don't do it to maintain your profit. And the absorbed direct costs, this is about maybe recharging to clients potentially. Maybe this is subscriptions, any costs that you think only are incurred, not directly for client, but back in the old day, it was disbursements, 15% or 10% admin fees. And some of our industries, PR comms, do that still.
I think the thing to note about the costs is they're pretty sticky. I mean, 60% are going to be staff costs, and reducing that is generally not popular with your workforce. You could invite them to take a pay cut. You can reduce headcount by attrition, but then it's always the good people who leave. or you can lay people off. None of them are particularly good. So some of these costs you can control, but to a large extent, there's not a lot that you can do about those. The revenue side, the revenue big number, is much more straightforward. Your revenue is simply your deliverables, the amount of stuff you deliver. So whether that is campaigns, projects, retainers, ads, brands, whatever. The number of things that you do times the price of those things is going to be your revenue. So more stating the obvious, but I'm still right. So if you want to then increase your revenue, there are only two things you can do. You can either increase your deliverables, so you can deliver more things. That, in a people-based business, tends to be a bit of a problem because you need to do that without increasing the headcount. The ideal is that you can grow your revenue without, for the same expenditure, by concentrating on the way you produce those deliverables.
This was actually a focus of last year's Indie Summit. So this is 100% within your control. This is how you run your business. Maybe some AI might come in handy here. But the efficiencies are all up to you and how clever you be as your team does it more effectively, efficiently. Utilisation, so when your team put time on jobs but you're not billing it, which is the billability piece. And then the non-billable sits between the two. So allowing that to continue is totally your responsibility and within your control.
Then, in terms of the price, everybody knows that there is a demand curve. In theory, the more you charge, the less you sell. No one really knows what the shape of their demand curve is. But I think there's a lesson to be learnt from the farmers in this. So ask a farmer, and he'll tell you that the year he makes the most money isn't the year of plenty, the year of the most apples or the most whatever they produce, the highest harvest. Because as soon as there is a good year in terms of volume, the price goes down. So you may end up just leaving your apples on the tree because it's costing more to pick them than you can sell them for. So the farmers make the most money on the years when sometimes on a bad year, but if they can beat the market, if they're ahead of the market, if they can plant earlier so they miss the weather, if they choose the right variety, if you can get ahead of the market, that's the way the price is higher, and that's the way you maximise your profit.
I pick on the second bullet point, which is the perceived value. I'm all about creating value, and you can potentially be creating new services with the same team as well. So looking at the different pricing machinations, not just in your own category of marketing, advertising, but look at how the industry, it's your business. How you choose to charge is totally up to you. And recognising your own value is totally up to you. So speaking to the people to make sure you harness that will help you increase your revenue.
Okay, so the next question is, what's the best way to make a big profit? And the simple answer is to make a lot of small profits. So if you imagine all the boxes are your deliverables, if you can get a little bit more value out of each one of those, then your profit is going to go up by the sum of all of those. So if you imagine, you were talking about IP, which I think is great. So if there is a little bit of IP that you have that is unique, maybe it's a platform, maybe it's a methodology, maybe it's something that you have developed that is in every project, if you could just put that in the box. The great thing about IP is it costs you nothing to reproduce. If you can sell it multiple times, it's 100% profit when you sell it. And this is somebody from the software business, so I learned that not that long ago. So how can you just get more value into that to just increase the profit? And it's the incremental bits. And this is the advert. So Paprika is an agency management software, and the idea is that it's allowing you to to manage the individual projects. And whereas I think the perceived wisdom, and often people will say to us, we're not interested in the 80% of projects are fine, we're not interested in those. We want to see the 10% or 20% that go wrong. And I kind of want to fight against that perceived wisdom, because that 10% of jobs that go over budget, they probably were always going to go wrong from the get-go.
Yeah. You
probably priced it wrong. The guy who briefed you from the client left the day after. You put the wrong person in charge of the project. It's very difficult to do much about those projects. So focusing on them, you may learn from that in the future, but it's not going to make you an enormous profit. If you can manage every single project to make that a little bit more profitable, that adds up in a peculiar way. So if you could get 1% extra on your revenue, just 1%, your total revenue goes from $10 to $10.1 million. So how difficult it can be to get 1% onto the value of every single project by adding your IP into the price, by adjusting your rates, by just getting that 1% in. And what if you could just trim your expenditure by 1%? There's always things that you can reduce. You can do a better deal with your landlord if you happen to have an office, if you're not all virtual. You could maybe recharge some of those costs to clients that you've been absorbing. There's 1% in there, I would almost guarantee, for every single business. So if you can increase your revenue by 1% and you can decrease your expenditure, what's going to happen to your profit? It's going to go up. It's going to go up by 20%. And the maths on that I always find crazy.
It does kind of doesn't make sense, but it is correct.
Kathryn has checked the maths on this.
Checked the maths. So, I mean, I'm up for 20% more. And, you know, if it's an extra 200,000, then I am 100% playing that game, and it's a KPI for all of my team. It might just be bill an extra hour. It might be hiring a service where we can make some margin. I would definitely be looking at my OPEX and my expenditure and saying, well, where can I do a deal with someone I work with a lot, perhaps try and get a better deal there for 20%? I mean, and I think the visuals that we saw before, it allows me to make the decisions, to see where to look and quickly, rather than having my whole accounts team crunking those figures. And yeah, I just think it's gold to be able to make that sort of money today in the climate environment with the weather as it is.
So I promise you 20% increase in your profit. My work is done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick.